Welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. A reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review our show. I'm your host, Wimlu, and for the first segment here, I'm joined by Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Keith, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So obviously we're going to touch on the game last night, and of course we're going to look ahead to Friday's game. You know, the little mini sort of back-to-back here with the Raptors and the Sixers. Just wanted to start with the game last night, though. 119-109 Raptors. I was reading your piece. The first line you wrote was, at times, it was as if the Toronto Raptors were playing 5-on-0. Keith, what did you mean by that?
I mean, you saw the game. It just seemed like the Sixers' perimeter defense and half-court defense just was missing last night. I mean, you look at the game, it was, one of those things, they were getting as many transition baskets as they would like. It was also where, we saw in quarters where Pascal Siakam just destroyed everyone, and then Gary Trent Jr. basically was killing them in the third quarter. So when the Sixers shot the ball extremely well, but they just couldn't make any defensive stops. And it was just a bad defensive game for the 76ers. So that's why I said that it kind of looked like it was a scrimmage at time. It looked like they were just running skeleton drills at time.
Yeah, well, you got a quote in there from Joel Embiid last night. One of the main things, we just haven't been able to guard the ball, and that's causing a lot of rotations and wide open shots. We just got to make sure all of us to keep the ball in front of us. Do you feel like Embiid, I mean, look, obviously the Sixers aren't loaded with perimeter stoppers. They really rely on Embiid to fix a lot of problems. To me, that quote sounds like Embiid saying, like, you can't ask me to clean up all your messes.
Yeah, I don't know if he's saying that. I think that the one thing I will say about Embiid is that he's brutally honest. Like, a lot of times after games, you ask a guy a question, they all say communication. We got to communicate better. And he's like, nah, this is what happened. I think that right now they have a lot of different guys coming in, and if you're going to be honest with yourself, we look at this backcourt, starting backcourt where you have James Harden, and you have Tyrese Maxey. They're great scorers, but they're not really known for defense. So what has to happen is the guys have to rotate. They have to do a lot of switches, and they're just not coming around quickly. And I think some people may, if you're not familiar with the Sixers, you may think that Joel Embiid is kind of saying that, but deep down but really what's happening is these guys just aren't making the rotations that they should make, and that's part of the game that they have to do.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a good point actually, because I think for the national media or people outside of Philly looking in who don't really see all this kind of stuff, you just see Embiid being blunt, and you might think, well, damn, that sounds really rude. But I think he's actually just, as you're pointing out here, he is really just like to the point. I like that actually as media members. I think it's way easier for us to sort of do our jobs when they clearly express what's going on. Right?
Exactly, because you get tired of, like, you saw the game yesterday. You were there. You were in the building, and there were certain guys talking about, well, we just got to communicate better, and it's like, nah, bruh. Nah, it's bigger than communication. So, and you always hear that. So when Joel says something like that, it is refreshing. Now, sometimes Joel will say something and people get offended by it, but he's one of those guys. He's always says, well, why y'all ask that question? Because I don't lie. So he was
fair.
Being real. Yeah.
No, that's fair. That's really nice. All right, so the defensive effort. I mean, you got to think they come back a little stronger on Friday. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm sure the Sixers probably went through some sort of light practice today. No, they're not doing practice today.
They
not for that game, really.
Yeah, they did film study. Yeah,
film study. Okay,
yeah, they don't practice a lot.
Really? Okay. Well, I guess that's a doc thing, right?
Yeah. It's a doc thing,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm sure in film study, the point of emphasis got to be things like getting back on defense and transition, because that defensive effort, like, obviously Philly, they got 70 points combined from maybe 80 points combined from Embiid, Maxey, and Harden.
80 points.
80 points, and they really weren't in the game.
Nah, they weren't. And the problem is, see, here's the thing with the defense. Like, okay, let's talk about Boston. They played Boston. They have, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Both of those guys had 35 points. So they had 70 points against them. I mean, you look at when they played the Spurs, the young Spurs, guys were getting buckets left and right.
Right.
So,
And that's not even a team with bucket getters.
nah, it's a young team, a young team that has 5 19-year-olds on there, right? So,
Yeah.
I think right now, the 76ers are that's just one of their major weaknesses. Again, and it's nothing against James Harden, it's nothing against Tyrese Maxey. It's just not their game. You look at it right now. A year ago or 2 years ago, they had Matisse Thybulle, who was in the rotation. He didn't get a tick last night. He didn't play at all. And then you had Ben Simmons. So what that is when you had those two guys patrolling up top, and then you had Joel Embiid in the back. It was a great defensive team. Even Danny Green, Danny Green is a great defender, right? Above average defender at this stage of his career. So when you have that, and then you look at the 76ers roster right now, you have PJ Tucker, you have Tobias Harris, and I feel like, PJ, they're asking him to do a lot, playing the three when he's, to me, more like a four.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of people out of position. Now, again, maybe the defense shows up, but it just seems like the rotations have been this way through all 5 games. And in regards to, they don't build that wall on transition D. So it to me is saying a lot for them to correct that after one day when you have a guy like Pascal.
Right. And listen, Pascal played great. I think game plan, at the start was pretty clear. They're going to play off of him, right? Make him shoot jumpers. But I just thought there was no pressure on the ball. There's a difference between we're going to play off him, let him shoot, and cut him off and build that wall. And there's a difference between what PJ was doing, which was just sagging back, not even really contesting, barely getting a hand up. And I haven't seen Pascal have one of these games where it's 20 points, 13 assists, 9 in the second half. But usually what Pascal does is he gets in that office in that elbow area, and then he breaks his guy down, gets to the paint, scores. He's got a decent little mid-range game as well. But for him to just burn the Sixers entirely on jumpers, it felt like Doc, maybe halfway through that game, even just completely shifted the way they guarded him. What did you make of Philadelphia's plan against Pascal last night?
That first quarter, it was not just him; it was everyone. I mean, when you look at it, the first 3 made 3-pointers were wide open, and I mean wide open. They were just whoa. I felt like Pascal, he missed some shots after the first quarter that made the defense seem like they did a better job. But I just think that his athleticism, his length, was just too much for anybody to guard. They just don't have anyone. Maybe you can say Joel can stay in front of him, but I think athletically the guys they had, they just didn't have one. So I don't think they did a pretty good job. Now, the thing is, what the Sixers could do, and I know you didn't ask me this, but what they could do is they could probably make some adjustments to the rotation.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is they got a guy in Matisse Thybulle who is a 2-time second-team all-defensive player, but he didn't play at all. He's not in the rotation. And then you have another guy, DeAnthony Melton, who is a quality 3-and-D guy. Maybe you may have to give him a little bit more minutes and then play Matisse to combat some of those things that Toronto was able to do. But the thing about Toronto, I will say this, they're long, they're athletic. It's funny when Pascal kind of slowed down a little bit, then Gary Trent took off in the third quarter.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And then Fred, my man Fred, who I mispronounced his name last time.
Oh, we'll get to that clip, don't worry.
So I love you, Fred. But my man Fred, is one of those things where, then all of a sudden you get him in space and then he's doing whatever he wants. So I just feel like the Raptors, especially for this group of Sixers, they're just a bad matchup. They're young, they're long, and they're athletic.
Yeah, and they shared the ball last night too. It's 32 assists for the team. Obviously, that you're gonna have a lot of assists when you really knock down threes, but as you mentioned, a lot of those were open. All 5 Raptors is 15 points or more. That's actually not even in a irregularity. That happens actually quite often for this team. So guys really know how to play with each other. And I know for the Raptors, the mood within their locker room is very strong. They feel very positive. Pascal has really come into this season really rejuvenated. He's averaging close to a triple-double. And, guys are feeling pretty good. I was curious, what's been the mood in the locker room for Philly? early this season. Is there any panic at all? Because this is a bit of a disappointing start.
Well, I would say they're disappointed. You can tell that they're disappointed, but at the same time, it's one of those things where they kind of knew that this was going to be tough.
Really?
Like, yeah, oh yeah, because so when you look at it, so therefore you're bringing in a new starter who basically had a knee surgery arthroscopic knee surgery in the off season, and that's PJ Tucker. You're asking him to play the three, and then your first three guys off the bench are also new, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have James Harden, and you're asking him to play a completely different way. You want him and Joel Embiid to be the focal points. So when you talk about it, you look at it, they open up against Boston, who is favored to win the East.
Yep.
Then you have Milwaukee, right?
Yep.
Now, then
that was a winnable game, though. Milwaukee was not playing at their best at all.
Yeah, that was a winnable game. That was a winnable game. But then after that, you look at it, so you have supposedly 2 bye weeks or two confidence boost games. And the one game that really got away from them was the Spurs game. And then you come to Toronto, and Toronto, let's face it, the Raptors is like a little rival of the Sixers. There's a rivalry there.
A little bit.
A little bit. And then after that, you go on to Chicago. So, they knew it was going to be bad. Now, did they know the defense was going to be this bad? No.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a lot of disappointment. People in Philly are upset. The players are upset. But I think it's one of those things when you have 4 new players in a 9-man rotation, is one of those things where you're saying to yourself, let's give it a little bit of time. Now,
right.
If they would have played, let's say, the Sacramento Kings or Orlando twice, and they would have squeaked by, people would say, hey, you know what? They're winning. They're winning. It's going to take some time for them to get this together. But I do believe that if they continue to lose, and I think they play on November the 12th, they'll play Atlanta for the second time. I think if they're continuing struggling by that point, it's going to be an all-out panic at that point.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the mood in Philly has got to be really good right now. I mean, Philly's in the World Series. Have the Eagles lost yet this season?
Nah, they haven't.
Okay, yeah. So there's other things to distract them a little bit, but it'll come around for the Sixers, and hopefully by that point they're okay. I mean, look, I had a couple more questions just about this team. So that perimeter defense, right? And I'm thinking about in order to win the Eastern Conference, which I think has to be one of the expectations for this team. Not saying that they're guaranteed to win it, but when you have the kind of talent that they do, you expect to at least contend for the championship. But if you're going to come out of the Eastern Conference, you got these type of wings that you need to have somebody guard. Jason Tatum, Jimmy Butler, Pascal Siakam, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kevin Durant. And I might be even leaving out a couple guys. So who is that guy for Philly?
Matisse Thybulle.
But he's got to
play. That's what I'm saying.
I was going to say
he's that guy.
But can you win with 40 minutes of Matisse or even 35 minutes of Matisse?
He
does give you don't have to really guard him on the 3-point line.
Yeah, you don't. But if you're asking me who that guy is on that roster, that's him right now.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Now, here's the thing about Matisse. Matisse worked hard this offseason on his jumper. Everyone was praising, all the work that he's put in. But he hasn't been playing. Like, he's played less than 6 minutes, fewer than 6 minutes this season.
Are you serious?
That's it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's it. So, but right now, I also believe that when we look at this Sixers team right now, there's going to have to be some changes, and with the roster. Now, they only have, you're allowed to carry 15 full-time, regular NBA players on your roster. They only have 14. So that's telling me that they're looking to add someone maybe via a trade or picking someone up, right? So I think that we'll probably get that person. Now, again, like right now, if it's not Matisse, I would have to say that, DeAnthony Melton is going to have to be a guy that's going to play because to me, you look at him as the second best, 3-and-D guy. Now, in a perfect world, it would be PJ Tucker, but I don't know, at this stage, because he's getting a little bit older.
Sure.
And I also think that, right now in this stage of his career, he's better utilized guarding a perimeter. I mean, not a perimeter player, like a post player.
Right.
Bodying somebody up. But it's going to have to be Matisse, and then after that, it's going to have to be DeAnthony Melton. Outside of that, they don't have anybody on that roster right now.
So, I mean, It might just be the offense, but why is specifically Doc only using Matisse in very, very small doses right now?
Well, I asked him after the game, and I said, "Look, Doc, is it time to play him?" He says, "Well, we've been considering it." I think that he really wants to give the newcomers they came, give them
Okay.
an opportunity and a chance to show what they could do. You
Mm,
know, like sometimes you have a guy. You know, let's face it, these new like they brought in Daniel House, Melton, P.J. Tucker, and they were all supposed to come in and provide 3D depth. That's something the Sixers didn't really have last year.
yeah, definitely.
So it's one of those things where, okay, they have one bad game. All right, well, then they played okay the next, and then the next one's bad. Am I going to like basically cut their minutes? No, I'm gonna let them play through it.
Hmm.
But I think as this time these games are accumulating, then after a while you're gonna have to reevaluate some things.
Right, right. And you know what? Right now, pressure wise, like when you think about the national media, everyone's focused on Brooklyn
Hmm.
because they're a mess. Ben Simmons fouling out every game. Steve Nash getting ejected. I've never seen Steve Nash pressed in my life before. Watching him play like 15, 16 years in the league, and all of a sudden he's getting ejected. And obviously the Lakers, right? Everyone's looking at the Lakers. But, eventually people are going to get a little tired of that storyline. If the Sixers continue to struggle, they'll probably look at the Sixers a little bit too. But, yeah, I mean, for themselves, though, obviously Daryl Morey is a very ambitious guy, right? He's very accomplished, but the one thing he doesn't have is that title. What's the internal expectations for this team?
Well, internal, of course, they expect to win a championship. I mean, there's been a lot of hype with this team
Okay.
about how they were going to go win the title, right? A lot of hype. I mean, it was a lot of self promotion and things like that. But I think the external expectation is greater than what they have, because the people in Philadelphia, when you look at Daryl Morey and you look at Doc Rivers, right? I mean, we all remember the Kawhi shot,
Hmm.
right? The Sixers lost in the second round. People were upset. They were saying that if Brett Brown didn't win that game, he should have been fired.
Yep.
But the way the game ended,
Yeah.
it was kind of like, can I fire this coach like that?
I mean,
Right? You
yeah.
can't, right? So a year later, he struggles to get out of the first round. They let him go. You bring in Daryl Morey, one of the most recognizable front office executives in any sport,
Yep.
and then you bring in Doc Rivers, who's ranked, who has one of the top 10 coaches all time. He has the ninth most wins in the NBA, and if they can't get out of the second round, I mean, it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
So I think yes, they have expectations that they got a champion. They have a roster who can win a title. It hasn't looked that way thus far, but I think that if they struggle to get out of the second round or don't get to at least don't get to the NBA finals, there's going to be a lot of outside pressure on them.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, I think people already discussed Doc's job a little bit. And I think the one storyline, I'm curious, just as someone on the complete outside asking a Sixers insider, like, is there any chance Embiid's not happy, or any chance he might want to move or anything like that, or is that still too much down the line?
I think it's still early right
Okay.
now,
All
but
right.
I do believe that we got to see on how this whole thing plays out.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm saying that is, because Embiid, let's face it, the 76ers became his team.
Yep.
He
Yep.
used to have to like tussle a little bit with Ben Simmons,
Yeah. Yeah.
but at the end of the day, it's his team. I feel like if they start struggling and we don't get to see Embiid playing the role that he normally plays, it wouldn't surprise. I'm not saying he's going to do it, but it wouldn't surprise me if he was like, behind closed doors, like, can y'all get me to Miami? Can you get me to New York? Can you get me to
Yeah.
LA? Because it's one of those things where right now the Sixers kind of, and I hate using this cliche, but they put all their chips in the table on these guys,
Yeah.
and if it doesn't work out, they're not getting any younger.
No, that's true. It's definitely be a team we're going to be hearing from quite a bit. Well, listen, to go back in memory lane a little bit too, because the Raptors and Sixers, they had that little history. Obviously, playing each other in the playoffs, obviously last year as well, but a couple years ago as well. But they also have some history in terms of just like potential trade discussions, right? Like the Raptors were in on that Ben Simmons situation. I don't think they were as close to getting Ben as obviously some other teams, but I kind of wanted to sort of revisit that situation. Like, how close are the Raptors to getting a Ben Simmons, or how serious do you think they were interested?
Nah, I mean, I think the Raptors were interested, but I don't think the Sixers were really, trying to I think the Sixers were asking for too much, knowing that the Raptors were going to give it to them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, it's kind of like, hey man, I really like your sneakers. All right, I'll give them to you for like $30,000. You know what I mean? And you're like,
Okay.
nah, bruh. Like, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, we're gonna have to run the clip, Derek. Because I believe these were the specific terms at that time.
In order for Toronto to get Ben Simmons, a package that included Ben Simmons, they wanted Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Kyle Lowry, and the number 4 pick in the draft.
All right, so Keith, first off, that clip is hilarious. Everyone knows that, you do great reporting and all that stuff. But I think Raptor fans had a joke about it. And when we sort of announced that we're going to have you on, people were sort of reminding us of that. What do you want to say about that clip?
Me no habla inglés. It's like, nah. You know what?
Yeah.
It was I butchered my man's name up, and I felt really bad after it came out. And I'm not going to say things happen because I need to do a better job of that. But I felt extremely bad about it because I was like, dang, I can't believe I did it. So you know what I mean? It is what it is, and y'all had to remind me of.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man.
It's all good.
I'm sorry, man.
It's all good.
You really took the time out of your day. It's an off day.
Yeah,
we got 25 minutes to talk Sixers. No, honestly, it's just interesting because, like, as you mentioned, that is essentially like, give me $30,000 for your shoes. Because, like, I don't think individually, the 4th overall pick, which became Scotty Barnes, the Raptors wouldn't do that for Ben Simmons. They probably wouldn't do Fred straight up for Ben Simmons right now with the way he's playing. I don't even know if they would do OG for Ben Simmons. Like, that's obviously closer. But I think ultimately the Raptors are saying, no, Ben's just too much of a risk. And you look at sort of how that situation is played out. It's really sad to see, man. But I think the other thing, too, is just like, speaking about Kyle, there was a time where the Raptors obviously were trying to decide whether we move Kyle or not when they were in Tampa. And there were discussions with Philly as well. So I just want to ask you, like, how close was Philly or how close was Kyle Lowry, to a move that would bring him back to his hometown of Philly?
I think ultimately Kyle is where he wanted to be. I mean, when you think, I think he wanted to go to Miami. I think that Philadelphia was an option for him. But it's kind of like when you look at Miami, it's one of those things, it's a tax-free state.
Right.
It's beautiful weather. And I guess he looked at it as it's one of those things that they have a opportunity to win a championship. But the thing is, sometimes now, again, Philadelphia would have been good for him, but at the same time, it's one of those things where sometimes you get what you really want when there's some other teams. You know what I mean? In there. Now, I'm not saying he used the Sixers, but I think that kind of helped his cause. I mean, because you think about this. Think about how the New Orleans Pelicans, I believe it was the Pelicans, at one point, they cleared up all this space. And all these people were thinking, oh, wow, they're doing that for Kyle, right?
Yeah.
And everything together. And then all of a sudden, the money that he wanted, and everybody was saying, there's no way in heck somebody's going to pay a guy
a lot of money, man.
A lot of money. He got paid, right?
Yeah.
So I think, but the Sixers, it was an option. I mean, because when you look at Kyle, I also think Kyle would have been a great fit for the Sixers.
I agree.
Because they need a point guard. He's a Philly guy, tough-minded. Like, I've known Kyle since he was in high school.
Yeah.
So I know his personality, and it would have been great for the team. But I think, he has a great relationship with Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
And it's Miami, man.
It's hard
Miami.
to compete, man. Yeah, it's true. Well, I mean, listen, before we get you out, since you've known Kyle for so long, man, you got a favorite Kyle memory? Kyle story? Maybe one that, a lot of people here haven't heard necessarily? Because, like Raptor fans, like, we love Kyle. Like, we talk about him as the greatest rapper of all time. So
the greatest rapper of all time?
Raptor. Yeah.
Oh, Raptor. Oh, I'm about to say,
rapper?
huh?
No.
Like,
we don't love him that much, man.
No, so here's the thing about Kyle. So Kyle went to high school with my cousin. They were on the same high school basketball team.
Okay.
Yeah, and like the thing about him was I liked it because he was confident as like a young age. Like confident.
How confident? Because
I mean, he was confident.
Yeah.
Like put it this way. He was the type of guy that he wasn't like he was ranked high, but he wasn't a McDonald's All-American or anything like that. But you knew that he knew he was really good.
Yeah.
Right. And there was a memory. It was funny. And they all tried to deny it. Right.
Okay.
But at that time, the University of North Carolina basketball team was playing, and they were in a tournament in South Carolina, in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And Kyle and them were down there, and the University of North Carolina was down there playing UNC Wilmington. Well, Kyle and my cousin and their teammates were outside the arena with a basketball saying to the University of North Carolina players, y'all want to play us? Y'all want to play us? So, like,
Okay.
that's how confident they were. But it's funny because when you look at Kyle
Yeah.
now compared to like Sean May and all those other guys, he had a more successful NBA career. And like his high school team, to be honest with you, all five of their starters went on and played Division One. Three of them went to Villanova, another one
Yep.
went to Providence, and the shooter, the shooting guard, went to Columbia. They were a
That's
really
pretty
good
good, man.
team. Yeah, they were a really good team. But that is the confidence they had. But in regards to Kyle, I know everybody says he's the greatest Raptor, but to me, I guess one of the best the other good things is how he gives back to the community.
Yeah, no
Like he
doubt.
represents, the community. Like it says Kyle Lowry from North Philly when they used to announce him
Yep.
here.
Yep.
It didn't say Villanova. And I think that to me, when you have a guy like that who's been successful, has made all the money that he's made, and he's still like loyal to where he came from,
Yeah.
that speaks volume.
No, that's super dope, man. And I think that you see it now, like the connections that he built with the players. Was always a great vet to his guys, always giving back, both here in Toronto and also Philly. And yeah, Keith, bro, this is great. Thank you for coming in. Thank you for being a good sport too. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to root for the Raptors, but hopefully the Sixers. I guess Sixers drama is also good for the job too. There's more things to write
Yeah,
about.
there's
So
been a lot to write about the last 10 years.
yeah, it's not boring. It's never boring in
Yeah.
Philly. So we're going to take a break. I'm your host, Wolu. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wayne Liu. I'm joined in the second segment here by Gina Mizell. Is that, am I getting
Mizell.
Mizell?
Yes, it's okay. I've heard it every which way, so no offense taken.
You know, we had such a lovely chat like in the 5 minutes during the commercial break that I forgot to ask for the name.
That's all right. No worries.
Also from the Philly Inquirer.
Yes.
So, look, we're going to talk more Philly, but we'll also talk, I think, more from the Raptors perspective, too. It's just I always am curious about, like, an outsider sort of perspective on how the team is doing.
Sure.
Especially since, as we talked about, the Raptors and Philly are always playing each other.
Yeah, I was joking that, like, I need to, like, rent an apartment here or something because this is my 4th time in Toronto since April and 6th time since last preseason. So we've seen a lot of the Raptors. The Sixers have seen a lot of the Raptors. And is it a rivalry at this point? I don't know. That people have thrown that word around. I think that's a little strong, but certainly these teams are very familiar with each other. And I think we saw a motivated Raptors team last night in that first win of this 2-game set.
Yeah, definitely a difference in motivation between the two teams. I'll have to say that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think rivalry is interesting because the two fan bases are quite nasty towards each other. It's bad.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's
and I mean, even in the arena last night, and this was happening during the playoffs too, but the FMB chants, all that stuff. And I mean, he's the one who ended up with a broken face last year. So
that is tough. Yeah. I do you get a sense that him and Pascal are okay about that? Because, like, that is an unfortunate play. Like, it really was a basketball play, but it also really did affect
It did, yeah. And it's funny because Pascal was asked about his relationship with Embiid yesterday after shoot-around, and a lot of people were kind of working on the story about the 3 Cameroonian players and the history that was made last night. But, and Pascal, he didn't say, like, oh, it was an interesting answer where I think they're cool, but certainly, like you said, that definitely impacted. I'm not saying that the Sixers would have beaten the Miami Heat in the second round, but the fact that he couldn't play in those first 2 games and had to wear a mask for the rest of the series, and obviously was also playing with a torn thumb ligament, which occurred by complete accident earlier in that Raptors playoff series. But
I forgot about that.
Yeah, no, he hit that game winner in Game 3 with a broken thumb, or excuse me, a torn thumb ligament. So go figure with that. But no, it did definitely impact their playoff run for sure. And like you said, it was a basketball play, but very unfortunate. And you could also argue that he should not have still been in the game when the Sixers, I think, were up 29 points. So there's all kinds of layers still to that we can continue to dissect.
Oh, trust me, the two fan bases are still hashing it out. There's every single time these two teams play, it's just violence on the timeline at all times. But listen, I guess that's sports, especially especially Philly sports, and even just especially Toronto sports too. I don't think the Raptor fans necessarily have that same reputation as like Philly does. It's not notorious, but I think anybody who has come across Raptor fans can tell you we're quite vicious as a group.
Well, and you're a whole country too. You're not one city. That struck me. The first time I ever came here was I just came for a vacation, and it was like maybe 2014, 2015. It was a second round playoff series against the Heat. So you can probably tell me which year that was. And I remember coming out to Jurassic Park and watching a game, like just for fun. And you talk to people and they're like, oh, I came here from Vancouver, from all over the country. And so like Philly fans are very passionate, but it's only one, in the grand scheme of the United States, it's only one little segment where you've got a whole country of Twitter timeline heroes and trolls and all those people. So
no, it's wild. You'll have people trolling from like the Yukon,
right?
Like that, and it's just like what
places that I probably couldn't even identify on a map because I'm a silly American. So
no, come on. I mean, listen, it is really cool because thinking back to when the Raptors won the championship, they had like 200 plus Jurassic Parks like set up across the country,
right?
So people didn't necessarily have to fly just to the one in Toronto, and it's just like the popularity of the sport in this country has just like exploded in the last 10 plus years, I would say. But listen, Raptors-Sixers, there's a history there. There's no doubt. Compared to last season, the two teams haven't changed that much to me. I feel like the core pieces are still kind of the same. Did you see anything new out of the Raptors last night in their approach, and vice versa? Sort of, did you see any difference in the way Philly usually approaches this matchup?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just think that the Raptors really took advantage of what the Sixers' weaknesses have been so far this season, especially defensively, where they got out and ran, and they were able to hit 3-pointers, and those are the two things that have given the Sixers a lot of trouble. And I think maybe not so much The transition defense, you could say with like Harden and Maxey, that could be an issue. But the 3-point defense, I feel like, and just the perimeter defense in general, with the amount of guys the amount of blow-bys they've allowed, the dribble penetration, like that's been a disappointment, I think, just based on the fact that, like you said, yes, the core is the same as far as Joel Embiid is back, James Harden is back, Tyrese Maxey is back, Tobias Harris is back, but they've added D'Anthony Melton and Daniel House and PJ Tucker, and those were guys who were supposed to shore up the defense and to give them, more just a better defensive play, and it hasn't translated so far. And I don't know if that's schematically, I don't know if that's communication. I think it's a combination of a lot of different things as far as just the early season figuring out process for the Sixers. But when Joel Embiid comes out on media day and says, "Oh, we want to be the best defense in the NBA," they are nowhere near that right now. They are bad right now on that end of the floor. So that's been a surprise in a negative sense, I feel like, for the Sixers.
Yeah, I mean, so okay, we talked about this with Keith in the first half, but when Philly really had that defensive identity with players like Jimmy Butler and Matisse Thybulle and Ben Simmons,
yeah,
with a younger Joel Embiid, who I think was probably more balanced towards playing defense versus playing offense. I think last season it was like a lot like he's in the scoring race. We should really.
And he had to be he had to anchor that team last year. Yeah.
Right. So, but it's like when you have to shift so much of your energy towards the scoring, obviously your defense is going to drop a little bit. Like when Embiid says that, do you feel like the personnel was built to even have a top 5 defense? Because
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is what you said, is that Joel was saying that, okay, I don't need to turn it on in the fourth quarter now. I can be more of a defensive force throughout the game because we have more offensive weapons with James Harden supposedly in better shape, which granted he has looked very good through the first. He's the one thing people can't really complain about. He's looked very good through the first 5 games with Tyrese Maxey's ascension, with Tobias Harris, still providing complementary scoring. But yeah, it's been more that they expected to be able to throw PJ Tucker on the best perimeter scorer, and he guarded Giannis in game 2 and did a pretty good job, all things considered. But and then you wanted to say that you could throw a Daniel House, a D'Anthony Melton, even a Matisse Thybulle, who isn't in the rotation right now, but obviously is a very good perimeter defender, and sort of be able to cover guys in the East. And you look up and down, guard a Kevin Durant, guard a Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum, and again, that just hasn't happened yet. So yeah, you don't, you don't necessarily have, an all defensive first teamer, but they expected to have a lot of good guys that they could put on those perimeter scorers and stop them. And like I said, so far, it's just not happened at all.
Yeah. But it's still early, I guess.
Yeah, it is. Don't tell that to Sixers fans. They're ready to fire everybody and trade everybody.
Well, I mean, how's that different from any other season,
it's
really?
True. I'm like, y'all, go enjoy the World Series.
Yeah, right.
The Eagles are 6-0. Come back when all that's over and see where this is.
I mean, that's actually probably the perfect cover, I think, for the Sixers right now.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. But I think even thinking on the Raptors' perspective, so the Raptors ultimately couldn't get past the Sixers, right? I think in that first round series, we can point to things on the Raptors side of Scottie hurt his ankle, and then Gary was sick for the first 2 games, and then Fred was never himself, and those are 3 important guys. But I think ultimately in that series, what I saw at least was just the Raptors defensively weren't solid enough to guard the Sixers. And to be fair, the Sixers were really good offensively.
Yeah.
I think with James Harden in that point guard type of role, obviously Embiid, the Raptors don't have a natural guy to guard him. I would say probably 90% of the league doesn't have a natural guy to guard Embiid. That's a funny thing for Raptor fans too. People are always like, we need an Embiid stopper. I'm like, there was one in Marc Gasol, and he went to Spain. After that, I don't think there is one.
Right.
There's not a magical. Are there magical Embiid stoppers out there, Gina?
I don't think so. Yeah, and you got to try all kinds of different coverages.
It's double team them, basically.
Right, exactly. I mean, you're throwing all different things, which if you're going to trust anyone to do that, Nick Nurse is the type of coach that you would trust to come up with some schemes. But yeah, like you said, it was an interesting matchup in the playoffs last year because on one hand, the Raptors, athleticism and length and kind of all the like-sized guys that they had, you could say that would present potentially a problem for the Sixers. But then the reverse of that is also true when you have a force like Joel Embiid. So yeah, I'll be curious to see if these teams, obviously they'll play again tomorrow and then throughout the regular season. But it would be another interesting playoff matchup because of all those factors. But
no, there might be an actual war that breaks out on Twitter.
I'm like, are we actually wishing for that? I don't know.
No, it's too toxic. I think people are going to meet at the border, like somewhere along the Great Lakes, and
right.
They're just
meet
gonna have to fight
in Buffalo, meet at Niagara Falls.
Yeah, the new NBA Meet Me in Temecula will be Meet Me in Buffalo. Raptor fans versus Sixer fans after another really, really disgusting series. Yeah, I mean, I think that my question too is just like, so ultimately the Sixers weren't able to get past Miami in the second round. Was there anything different that Miami did? Is there a different element that Miami brought that the Raptors could have probably tried to emulate in order to beat the Sixers? Or
yeah, I mean, I hate to use the like cliche term of like toughness or like kind of that like rugged physicality, but that certainly was at play when you.
So it's a higher level for Miami.
Yeah, and like again, someone like a PJ Tucker was on the other side of that matchup last year, and that was part of the reason why the Sixers, Joel Embiid literally sat at his like exit interview press conference after Game 6 and was like, "We don't have anybody like PJ Tucker." And Daryl Morey's like, "Well, I have a solution to that. Is I'll go sign PJ Tucker."
PJ.
Right, exactly. We have a little bit of a history.
Yeah. Signed him out of Toronto, by the way. PJ said,
"Yeah, exactly. Yes."
Essentially, PJ said, "I want to win a championship."
You're right.
And went to Houston.
Well, he was a self-made player, I guess, at that point, and had some
it made
cachet.
sense. Made sense. Trust me,
sure.
as a Raptor fan, I love PJ. I really wanted to keep him.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, they kind of just lacked that grit and that toughness, rebounding. Again, James Harden, other than one game in that series, just did not look like himself, didn't have the burst. And then again, the fact that Joel didn't play in the first two games and then just didn't quite look right even coming back after that, which again, his eye socket was fractured and was coming off a concussion and playing in a mask. So you understand it too, to some extent. But yeah, I think that, I mean, and that was sort of the MO of that Miami team, right? It's like, it didn't matter who was playing for them. They still wound up as the number 1 seed in the East and nearly were a Jimmy Butler shot away from going to the finals. And so I think that was like an element that the Sixers needed to address in the offseason. And again, they thought that they did. And as far as bringing in a PJ Tucker, a Daniel House, a DeAnthony Melton, even like a Montrezl Harrell, who is very fiery on the court. And it so far just hasn't translated.
Yeah. And you know, in Daryl Morey's defense, I would say like those vets you sort of expect them to peak in the playoffs.
Sure.
You know, like you're probably not expecting PJ to be going all out Game 5 of the season.
No.
But you probably do expect a better effort on Friday, right? Like
yeah.
I think Raptor fans, like, I think we shouldn't feel too comfortable in the idea that like, wow, it was kind of easy to just beat the Sixers coming in on Wednesday. It's not going to be an easy game on Friday. I really don't expect it. Unless the Sixers really have some other motivational issues.
Sure.
Like, they should come out with a much better effort. Like, simple things like getting back in transition.
Yeah.
Like, they got to just do a better job.
Exactly. Yeah. Getting back in transition, loose balls, staying in front of staying in front of the ball, all that type of stuff, I think. And you saw that, like, they lost their first 3 games of the season, 2 against the Celtics and the Bucks. So you sort of not excuse exactly. You know, don't excuse it, but it's understandable. Then they completely laid an egg at home against the San Antonio Spurs, which that is what sort of sent the fan base into a tailspin. But they righted the ship a little bit. They beat Indiana, but then come up here, and this is a tough place to win. This is a tough team to play. And like you said, they had a lot of motivation coming into this game after last spring. And so now the motivation is going to get flipped, where the Sixers now have some, not like desperation, but as desperate as you can be in Game 6, I feel like just to like show that, okay, can we actually put together a good game against a good opponent, because we haven't done it yet in our first 3 opportunities to do so. So that's what I'll be looking for.
Yeah, and hopefully that won't happen. But from my perspective,
right.
No. But seriously though, like their top guys played really great. Like I think that's still the ultimate core, is that like Embiid obviously gives the Raptors problems. James Harden is just a tricky cover no matter what. And then Maxey, I don't know what it is. Does Maxey play this well against any other team?
I mean, he had a great year last year,
Yeah,
but that was, I would say that was his best game of the young regular season so far. As far as getting involved early, he's obviously such a weapon in transition, and is a guy who can drive to the basket, and his speed is such an asset, and can also shoot well from 3, and was really, really good after the James Harden trade at kind of down the stretch of last season. So no, that's the best he's looked. That is, I mean, Embiid put up a 40-point game against San Antonio, but I would say that last night was the best that he's looked as far as just like efficiency, getting what he needed.
He got to all his spots.
Yeah, I mean, the versatility that he was able to show, and Doc Rivers pointed to the period where he had to come out in the third quarter, because he's still kind of on a weird like substitution pattern right now because of his plantar fasciitis and his conditioning coming back. And Doc Rivers pointed to that and saying, when we had to take Joel out, that is sort of when the Sixers were on their push, and then the Raptors pushed the lead back out to double digits. So
Right.
I would imagine that will be similar. But I guess my greater point was that that's the best that Joel has looked in as far as anchoring the team. And yeah, James Harden is, like you said, is a tough cover regardless, and has looked very good so far in the season. So no, other than the sloppiness of the offense and the turnovers and the way that the Raptors are able to capitalize on that, there were other good things happening for the Sixers offense. So we'll see how that's able to carry over on Friday.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm terrified of Tyrese. I'm just look. Literally, game one, he had 38 points in game one. I think that might have been. I guess he played in the playoffs the previous year, but he wasn't like really. In the rotation.
No. That
so
I believe. I mean,
playoffs?
and I don't think he's ever dropped 40, so I believe that's still.
Oh,
his,
great!
His
well, they have another chance
high,
against
right?
the Raptors on Friday.
But no, I mean he is a dangerous guy, and what's funny is he's very much. We're talking about how crazy or super passionate or negative sometimes these fan bases can be, but I don't know if I've ever seen an NBA fan base love anybody as much as they love Tyrese Maxey. So as fearful as you are of Tyrese Maxey, that is exactly what endears him to some cold-hearted Sixers fans, is the way he plays and the way he carries himself has really been fun to watch.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think we spoke about the hostility between the two fan bases, but I think the one thing everyone actually can agree with is just Tyrese is super fun.
Yes.
And I'm just like what is it about this matchup against Toronto? Like, are the Raptors playing him differently? Is it like they send more attention to James and Joel?
That's a great question.
Like, why? Because he might be averaging like 25 or more against the Raptors.
Yeah,
we got to put an end to this.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think he's just able to attack for whatever reason against this defense, and he's able to get to the basket. He's able to get in transition, and then again, if you try to double or maybe he gets free, and then he's able to hit those 3-point shots as well. But yeah, I mean that game one that you're referencing. I mean, I remember that arena just chanting Maxey, and it was like again the potential MVP is on your team if you're Sixers fans, and like I've never seen people go as bonkers as they have for Tyrese Maxey. Yeah. So there's just something very like joyful about his game. So yeah, super fun, as you said, is a good way to describe it as well.
Yeah, no doubt. And listen, I think for a lot of Raptor, like probably the vast majority of Raptor fans have not been to Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
Especially during a playoff setting. When the fans are happy there, it feels like the building is rocking. Like I think one of my favorite moments in my young career covering just, in sports media was Game 4. This is a bad memory for Philly fans, but Game 4, 2019, the Raptors were down 2-1. Mm-hmm. Pascal had suffered an injury. He wasn't playing 100%. And the Sixers were back and forth with the Raptors. And if the Raptors lost that game, the series was over.
Sure.
And down the stretch there, Kawhi Leonard hit like 3 or 4 big pull-up threes, and they won in a narrow game. And I think my fingernails are literally in the media board, in the media room,
right?
Or the aisle which I was sitting in. So,
yeah.
No, that building is really scary. Is what I'm trying to say. It's not easy to sort of play in there.
Yeah, I mean the arena here is the same way. It's a lot of there's some juice in both those gyms, which I think also creates the hostility or just the combative nature of these teams. And I think it is just also they've played each other so many times in the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you get the quick back-to-back here. You got the quick back-to-back at the end of last season as well. I think it was a home and home, that one. So, yeah, there is really a lot of matchups. And I think the last question I kind of want to get to is just looking more big picture. Mm-hmm. When you follow the bigger storylines around Philly, there's always this discussion about Doc Rivers.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about it. He's not really Joel's guy. He's not James Harden's guy, and he's not Daryl Morey's guy.
Right.
And is this the last year of his deal?
He's got one more, I believe.
One more year? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the owners are rich. I think they could pay
right.
2 coaches.
Josh Harris was here last night. I'm sure he'll be here tomorrow as well.
Okay.
Yeah, he's in town.
Yeah, I mean, what would it sort of take for a move to be made on that front?
Yeah, no, it's, and all your points are well taken. I don't know if it's they lose, how many games they lose over the next 2 weeks, how many games they lose over the next month. I don't know what the magic number is, but it was interesting. I was walking into my apartment a few days ago. I think it was after they lost to the Spurs potentially. And those emails that we all get from like the betting services, and are like, here's these random lines about random things. And it was like Doc Rivers moves into basically the leading category for like first coach to be fired.
Wow.
He surpassed Steve Nash.
That's hard to do.
Which let's remember that Steve Nash, Kevin Durant said you need to fire him or trade me. Like we can. So I thought that's not a great look for Doc. But yeah, it's like, and I'm never one of those people to say this person should be fired. This person shouldn't be fired. But it's tough because he was on tenuous ground, I feel like, at the end of last season. And at exit interviews, him and Daryl Morey sat at the table or the dais at the press conference, and like people had directly asked Daryl with Doc sitting right next to him, is Doc Rivers going to be back next year? Like it had to be that direct of a question. And he said yes, and obviously that ended up being the case. But you know, there has been a lot of noise and a lot of speculation just around all the things you just mentioned, mostly that Doc Rivers was hired before Daryl Morey was hired. And you see all the other moves that have been made as far as all these former Rockets coming back to the Sixers. And people are like, okay, is that going to prompt a move? I mean, there's guys on Doc's staff. You know, Dave Yeager is a former NBA head coach. Sam Cassell is regarded as a young up-and-comer, like going to be a head coach someday. So, no, it's interesting. And like I said, if they continue to struggle, because after this, the Sixers play a back-to-back in Chicago, so another playoff caliber team.
Yep.
They play 2 games against the Wizards. They play like the Suns are in this stretch. The Hawks are in this stretch. Like it's the cliche, but like it doesn't get any easier for this team. And so if they continue to lose and not look good, and they can continue to say, "Oh, we're figuring it out," but if they continue to struggle, it's on the outside pressure or the outside heat is obviously only going to get stronger. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, it's never boring with the Sixers.
Never boring.
I guess that's good from a news perspective, isn't it? At least
it is. I mean, there's always something happening, and obviously this season is far different than last year when the Sixers were dealing with the whole Ben Simmons situation. And then, oddly enough, like actually playing pretty well out of the gate. They started off relatively strong before they got hit with COVID, and that sort of derailed some things before they got back on track. Further along in the season, but. I said coming into the year, I'm like, oh, it's really going to be like, how does this work from a basketball perspective? Are all the main questions surrounding this team? And like I said, so far, at best, very much a work in progress, and at worst, not playing well at all right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, fortunately, Philly fans are a very patient group.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, my inbox, my Twitter mentions are all showing that right now.
There you go. All right. Well, look, that does it for us today. I'm your host, Willow. You've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review our show. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Thanks again to Gina. Thanks to Keith. Thanks to our board producer, Derek Brandale, and Jennifer Rolnick for helping us with the YouTube stream. Catch Raptors-Sixers on Friday, and I will talk to you tomorrow and also after that game. Thank you.